Talk me through your first time sitting in a Formula One car.
Yeah, I was at Silverstone, and it was in a Brabham BT58. The old neck's like this, you know?
Yeah. So how about the first race weekend then?
To be fair, it was a bit of a disaster. And I'm sitting on the grid, you know, my first F1 race at Monaco. My dad won there in 1959.
Your dad being Sir Jack Brabham, by the way, 3-time Formula One world champion. How does that happen that you're not, engulfed in motorsport from a young age?
There was an interest in it, but I never sat there and looked at a magazine and went, oh, I'm going to do that one day. It just never entered my head. And then he sat down with me one day and he just said, is this something that's quite serious? Do you really want to do this?
How did you feel going into Formula One, racing your first race? How did you manage that pressure and how much of it did you feel?
David Brabham, welcome to the Backseat Drivers podcast, an official backseat driver now. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Made it in life now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm a good backseat driver, but anyway.
So where shall we start? We were just talking about some of your career in junior single-seaters. I want to go all the way back to actually young David, where you grew up in quite a unique household, fair to say.
Yeah.
Reading up on everything, it's interesting to actually see how racing wasn't something that you necessarily got into early on. Is that right? Yeah,
no, it's fair. Strange household, I guess. Not normal upbringing, I guess, for me. Dad at the time was the most famous Australian. So everywhere we went, everyone knew who he was. I'd walk past all these trophies, but I really didn't understand what it meant. But I had a football under my arm and a skateboard, and that was me as a kid. But I just wanted to play football. Didn't even think about motorsport. I was into sports and I did a lot of sports, but football was my real passion. That's where I wanted to go with it. Okay, so you probably weren't aware at the time, seeing trophies around the house, on what your dad had achieved, for example. When was that? When did you get a sense of, my dad's a huge deal in racing? That's a good question, because I think as I got older, it slowly sort of sinks in. I knew my dad was famous before I really understood what he was famous for. And as I got older, it started to, you start to read more. I was like, I'm talking, when I was playing football, I was 7, 8, 9 years of age. So Dad had retired, and there was no real racing that I could see. My older brother started racing, Jeff. I went to a couple of his races, but I was having more fun sliding down an earth bank with a mate in a cardboard box or something. You know what I mean? And it was like, oh, how'd you get on? So that was my upbringing. But I reckon it was probably more so when I started racing, when I started karting, was when it really sort of hit home more about what he had achieved. Yeah, got you. Because I also saw your dad. Actually, racing wasn't maybe brought up so much, where you went to, for example, boarding school, right? Yeah. And racing wasn't ever a thing until you came back, and then it was actually your brother that kind of got you into karting. Was that right? When you? So I went to an agricultural boarding school to learn about agriculture, because we had 4,500 acre farm just outside of Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. And I was being groomed to be a farmer, basically. Okay. I left school at 16 and then started working on the farm, but also went to a college in Wagga. And it was a wool classing college to learn about wool microns and stuff like that. So far removed from anything to do with motorsport, other than on the farm, to be fair. Tractors. Any vehicle I could get my hands on, it was always flat out and sideways. Even always flat out and sideways. It was just, when I think about it, how the hell did I survive? Because I just took so many risks, but I felt comfortable with the risk, and could obviously was drifting whatever I could, tractors and utes and cars and motorbikes and whatever. And you had the freedom to do it. You know, you're out there on a big farm. No one cares, you know. So that was definitely inside me. But it wasn't till I went to America to watch my brother race Indy cars in 1982. It was his first year in Indy cars after winning the Can-Am championship in 81. And it was my first time really looking at motorsport for real, because I'd been so far removed from it before that. And I was just big eyes, like, oh, look at this. You know, this has got to be better than chasing sheep. So I saw a go-kart in a workshop. He was actually going to do a couple of races for Rick Gallis to help Al Unser Jr. win the championship in Can-Am in a Frisbee. And he was doing a seat fit. And I was walking around the workshop. That was my first workshop I'd ever really walked around to do with motorsport. I saw a go-kart. Guy was working on it. I asked him, do people race go-karts? I had no idea, absolutely no idea. But this was a racing go-kart. My neighbour, who I went to school with, we did actually make a go-kart for the farm for a bit of hooning around, but didn't even think about racing karts, didn't even know it existed.
That really surprises me. So coming back to you saying you're kind of groomed to be a farmer, and just then you said you were so far removed from racing before you went to watch your brother in IndyCar.
Yeah.
How and why? Because I'm sure a lot of the viewers watching, having your dad being Sir Jack Brabham, by the way, 3-time Formula One world champion. How does that happen that you're not, engulfed in motorsport from a young age?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, people would think that straight away, wouldn't they? But, you got to remember, Dad retired when I was 5. We went back to Australia. Yes, he was all over TV and quite famous, but, I was young and football was my world. And then I went off to an agricultural boarding school, which, we didn't really talk a lot about racing because most of the kids there were farmers' kids, So I did enjoy, when Dad did come home, he'd bring an Autosport back, and I was quite into it in terms of reading about what was happening. There was an interest in it, but I never sat there and looked at a magazine and went, oh, I'm going to do that one day. It just never entered my head.
Do you think, sorry, I was going to say, do you think, like nowadays, do you see it a lot where drivers that are pushed into the sport early naturally because their parents have an interest, maybe it doesn't work out? Do you think it has to be a natural way, like your son or daughter gets into it?
Yeah, I do. I think, you see it a lot in the racing paddocks, fathers generally, but there are some mothers, but generally it's a bloke thing where they want their kid to go racing because they've had a passion for it and they love it. They've stuck him in a go-kart at a young age and off goes this kid trying to learn the craft. And at the end of the day, do they really have the passion? Are they driven? These are the things that make success. So you see it a lot. But, after a while, people get up to speed with it and fall in love with it. And that's what they want to do. So it's a real mixed bag, to be fair. But if I'm working with drivers, I really want to know, okay, where's the passion really come from? Is it you as a driver, or is it your parents? Because that will tell you what you're dealing with. And
what was the clear sign for you back then when you did karting? Was there a sign, oh, David's really picking this up and working hard towards it?
Well, when I put it this way, when I sat down and saw Dad, which wasn't that often, he was always traveling. So when he came back to the farm and I came back from America, I said, I'd like to have a go in a go-kart. And his face just went white. He just thought, I thought I got away with it. You know what I mean? So he wasn't that helpful. So I went over to my mate's place across the road. Well, it wasn't across the road. It was probably a few miles, but that was the neighbour. And I said, well, we need to go to a go-kart race meeting. So we went to Griffith racetrack for a meeting, and it was the New South Wales country titles. So it was a fairly big meet. And we were like, my God, we've got to do this. So we ended up buying a second-hand go-kart, and off we went. Dad was not a part of that at all. So it had to, it did come from me. It didn't come from my dad, that's for sure. But it came quite late. I was 17 when I started.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Why was that, do you think? Like, why did your dad not want to encourage you to go and are you the youngest of the three brothers?
Yeah.
Why did he not want to encourage all of you to not force you into the sport, but at least surround you in it? What stopped him, do you think, from... Why didn't he want you to go down the motorsport route as being a driver?
It's a good question. Probably a complex question. But, if I simplify it, I think, he had two of his sons go through it. I showed no interest at that point. I was on the farm. I was working on the farm. He obviously had the farm, and it was like, well, someone's got to look after it. So for him, it was very much, right, we'll push David down that way. I didn't sort of knock on his door and say at 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, hey, I want to go racing. I never did that. So it just wasn't on the radar. So for him, he was like, great, got someone to look after the farm.
And without getting too personal, but for our viewers, what was your relationship like with your father growing up? You said he was around, like, traveling a lot for work, I assume. And what was he like as a person, growing up? People want to know what it's like to grow up in with a 3-time Formula One world champion. Well,
I don't see it like that, I guess. He was just my dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is the same as what Josh said, Josh Hill.
Yeah, right. And, at the end of the day, he's my dad. And dads do things that piss you off, and they do things that are great, and it was a real sort of mixed bag. But he was away a lot. So, my relationship the close relationship with my parents was really with my mum. She used to go karting with me when I started Formula Ford, and we go off testing or racing. It was normally mum and I doing it, So dad would pop in and pop out, because he was busy all over the place. So I would say as I got older, as we got older, the relationship was much better, and I would say closer as we sort of went through our years. And, at the end of the day, it's a relationship with your dad. It ebbs and flows,
What's interesting to me, I didn't realize how late you started.
Yeah.
Karting, 17. So how on earth did you progress so quick through the junior category? Your junior category is stacked. You won British F3, Macau. How on earth did that happen so quickly?
Yeah, I think it was down to just going flat out and sideways.
From all the farming.
On the farming stuff. No, really? Seriously. Because, if you're thinking about, training up a driver, if you're out on the dirt and you're drifting, you get a real sense of feel.
Yeah.
And when I got in a go-kart for the very first time, and Dad was there, and he wasn't going to come. It was just me and my mate, Terry Gutler, next door. And we got the ute. We put the go-kart in the back and literally just started the ute up. And I get a knock on the window, and it's Dad. I'm wind the window down. And he goes, I better come with you. Okay, fine. So he jumps in and off we go. And as we're, going around the track, he's talking to us about lines. Then he found a piece of plastic, like the number plate off a go-kart, which was like a yellow square. Found a piece of that. He put it on the road and say, right, when you get to that, turn in. So he was sort of teaching us a little bit.
Okay.
And I didn't know this at the time. It was only years later that we would talk about those experiences, what he really thought. And he went, I didn't realize that you could drive that fast. He just didn't see it coming. And I think for me, I was a lot quicker than my mate, but I just had that feel, it just came quite naturally to me. And so then he came to the first race meeting at Griffith. I ended up in hospital. So I went over and over and over. And back then you didn't have suits.
No.
I was wearing a pair of jeans and a jumper. It was 30-something degrees, like 35 degrees. I had no T-shirt, no nothing. It was just a jumper and a pair of jeans. And you could go racing like that. So I ended up going over like this because I tried to pass someone around a corner and touch wheels, and that was my first lesson. Don't touch wheels.
Yeah.
Over and over I went, and my whole back, obviously, my jumper came up, and I'm just sliding across the tarmac on my back. And I think my dad was going, well, he's never going to get back into a go-kart again. So I ended up in hospital, all bandaged up like this. And yeah, it was painful.
Yeah.
So that was my first go-kart race meeting.
The farming stuff makes more sense to me now because I had a friend who's been when we were younger, he'd lived on a farm since he was a baby, right?
Yeah.
Quad bikes all the time. And we went karting for the first time and he was fast, like without barely anything. So I think it is, you do develop a lot of skill there but now people think, you just need to do karting from 4 years old, go to Europe.
Yeah. And I was racing against those types of kids when I came over to England to race. I'm racing against Mika Hakkinen, Alan McNish, Michael Schumacher, all those guys who started young in karting. By the time I got over there, they had a lot longer career than I did at that point, but I still had a fair amount of experience having raced go-karts, Ford lasers, front-wheel drive lasers, which is like a Fiesta, Formula Ford, Formula 2, Formula Atlantic. So by the time I came to the UK, I actually had a reasonable amount of experience, and I think that helped me. But they had longer careers, so I was used to the bigger car, and they had karting from age 4, 5, 6, whatever it was,
Yeah.
And then how involved was, you say your dad was there the first time you went in a go-kart and was impressed at how natural you were, I guess. How involved then was he going forward through your karting career and your racing career in terms of, coaching? Because one thing Josh Hill picked up on, I'm using him as an example because he was in quite a similar situation to you with a dad and granddad that were Formula One champions. And he said he hated it. He didn't want his dad involved coaching him. And he said he knows that's stupid because
that's the father-son thing. Yeah, it doesn't always work, does it? It's better off having someone outside the family.
And did you have
coaching
that feeling with your dad?
With my dad, like I said, he wasn't around a huge amount. And to be fair, I went off and did my karting and, he sort of let me run with it. And it was a second-hand go-kart and I was doing okay. And then he sat down with me one day and he just said, is this something that's quite serious? Do you really want to do this? And by that time, I kind of figured, actually, I really enjoy it. I want to do more of it. So he said, okay. Then we bought a brand new go-kart, and off we went. And I did a race in Orange, and he was there. And I won. It was half wet, half dry, and I won by half a lap. And that moment, then he went, right, I got to get behind David. And that's when he started to, get much more behind me because he could see I could do it and do it well. But it was that moment, apparently, he said later, that, when I saw that, it was like, okay, we've got to do something a lot more serious now. So, and I was working on the farm, so I couldn't do as many go-karts races as I would have liked, because I was busy. So I only did like a handful of races in go-karts for sort of 2 years, I guess. Yeah.
And then it was a really quick progression to Formula One. You were 24, wasn't it, when you finally reached Formula One?
24.
24, yeah. But before that, I want to talk about Macau.
Yeah.
Macau is a staple of a race to win, incredible achievement you've done there. What was that like? Because it's always the best talent that goes to Macau. Verstappen.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think Verstappen
if you look at the grid of 1989 at Macau, it's insane. There's so many Formula One drivers that eventually became F1 drivers on that grid, and world champions, obviously. Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen, and Eddie Irvine was there, Alex Zanardi, Gianni Morbidelli. It was just packed full of unbelievably talented drivers. So I was very lucky, to go there and win at my first attempt there. Oh. A little bit of luck as well, because it was a big accident down down at the Lisboa turn. Everyone got kind of stuck. My car was fairly protected. I think that some of that was my intuition told me that there was going to be an accident as we all rushed into the corner. So I went over to the left, and then as I turned in, I managed to get into a place where everyone was hitting around me, but my car was fine. So I was able to do the race after they cleaned up the mess. But some of them couldn't. They couldn't fix the cars, so they eliminated some of the top drivers straight away. And then off we went, and Michael Schumacher won the first heat. I was second.
Good grid then.
Yeah. And then I won the second heat. Nearly lost it actually on the last lap. So I'm thinking about my victory speech. Am I going across the top of the mountain? And missed my line and went onto the dirt and just nearly hit the wall on the last lap. So I nearly blew it right there and then. But luckily I didn't. But it did teach me a lesson, that's for sure.
Have you seen onboards around there?
I was just going to ask you, actually. Yeah, I have. But give people an idea, because it will only be the diehard racing fans that watch us that will know what Macau is. We'll overlay some onboard or something with it now, but give us an idea of what it's like to drive. Would it have been an F3 car at that time?
F3, yeah.
To drive an F3 car open wheel, also in a less safe era than it is now, around that track, because it is tighter and scarier than Monaco when you watch an onboard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's fast. There are some really quick sections, but, no margin for error. I mean, literally, it is just like a tunnel all the way around. Obviously, super fast down past the pits and through the two fast corners down to Lisboa. And a lot of accidents. There's always accidents there because the margins are so small. You have to be so accurate, accurate. So it is a great test for a driver, and I think anyone who wins there damn well deserves it, because, it's not that easy. It really isn't.
And at that point, when you won that race, did you think, okay, Formula One, getting into a Formula One seat is looking very good?
No, to be fair, when I came to England, I thought, okay, 2 years in F3, 2 years in F3000. At that time was F3000.
Which is the equivalent to like F2, yeah.
Yeah, like F2. And I didn't really think about Formula One. I was extremely motivated to win that one, put it that way, because during the 1989 F3 season, I was racing for Bowman Racing, and our main competitor at that time was Alan McNish in the West Surrey racing with Dick Bennett's. And our team protested their team because of an engine situation where the engine was lowered and I think it was the starter motor had been moved and put into a different place. And there was a rule about you couldn't add metal to metal on the engine. So I didn't know anything about it till the protests sort of came up. Because I sort of shot off into the championship lead pretty quickly. And then by mid-season, we were very close with Alan because, his performances started to increase and started to catch us. And I don't know, the team must have panicked or something. Anyway, so there was a protest, and then Dick, who'd run the Volkswagen Spice engine forever, knew that there was in the oil gallery, there was a sleeve put in there to narrow the gap, which is metal on metal. So he protested, and all of a sudden I was leading the championship and 24 points taken away from me, and I'm P6. Yeah. So we're sorry, they appealed, we didn't. So Alan was leading the championship technically, and I was P6. So by the time we got to the end, I had a really strong end of year. Could have won it in the last race with a 24-point deficit. And I crashed trying to win it in the first corner. And then by the time I got to Macau, I was still angry because we didn't know what the results of that championship. We had to go to court. So I had added motivation to go to Macau and win that.
Fired up. You were fired up.
I was so fired up. Yeah. Yeah, it was like, I'm winning this one. Get out of my way. That was my attitude, And yeah, luckily I won it. And then I think in February, I think the courts decided to give everyone their points back. and I'd won the championship that way, basically.
It's a bit of a deflating way to win, isn't it? It was still a massive achievement, but I can imagine. I hate it when like I get gifted I don't hate it when I get gifted a win, but you know, if you were P2 on the road and then a week later it comes out that you're first, it's kind of takes away from it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And that's not the first time that's happened in my career too. Because Bathurst, when I won Bathurst with my brother Jeff, same sort of thing. We finished second on the road. The other guys got excluded, and we ended up winning. It puts a little bit, not a sour taste, because you've won the race and it's a big race, but it's not done the way you want it to be done. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's another mental track as well.
Yeah.
Some of our viewers will definitely be on the simulator and drive Bathurst.
Yeah. Such a cool track.
Yeah.
It really is.
The mountain section just looks wild. Yeah.
It is.
As hard as it is on the simulator.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends a lot on what car you're driving, you know. So I've done Aussie V8 races there. Sometimes you're in a car that's just outside the window and you're really struggling with it. Then it becomes quite a scary place. And then, I've driven it was years ago. It was a Ferrari. I can't really remember what model it was now. And that was beautiful across the top of the mountain. We were the quickest across the top. We just slow on the straight, but it was, when it's like that, you're so into the circuit, and it feels really good. You know, it's an amazing circuit.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, kangaroos hopping around.
Yeah, I saw a few of those. Yeah.
I don't want to jump around too much, but just to get a bit of a timeline of your career.
Yeah.
So you start karting in Australia.
Yeah.
Then you came over to the UK or to Europe.
Yeah.
And
after I'd done, Formula Ford and Formula 2 in Australia. Yeah.
Okay, and then you came over here, and what was your first cars over here? Was that F3?
No, it was actually Vauxhall Lotus. So it was the first year of Vauxhall Lotus.
Okay.
Which is where, I did the British and the European Championship. So, Alan McNish was in that one, Mika Hakkinen was in it, a load of other drivers. So it was a brand new championship. And it kind of replaced, I'd say, Formula Ford 2000 back then. And I hated it. It was literally like going back from driving a Formula Atlantic car, in New Zealand and America when I did some races in that. Now, Formula Atlantic car was quicker than an F3 car. And it was like going back to a Formula Ford with wings, and it was a new team. They weren't really up to scratch. And I had totally lost my motivation. I actually thought after 6 months of being in the UK, I'm headed home. It got that bad. Everyone could see me not happy in the situation. And then my dad, Camel, and to be fair, the owner of the Derek Bell Racing wasn't Derek Bell. It was a property developer called Graham Burrows. And they all came together and said, look, he needs to be in Formula 3. So I went and did Formula 3 Class B for Jack Brabham Racing. And it just transformed me as a person, but also my career, because I won 5 of the last 7 races in that. And then that got me the opportunity to go up for a free drive in the Jewson car with Bowman. So there was 5 of us going up for it. And I ended up winning the prize. So I got a free drive for the 1989 championship.
Okay, and that was in what cars? Sorry,
that was in F3.
Okay,
so the Vauxhall Lotus was the first one that I came over to the UK to drive.
Okay, and then another kind of question I have, and we'll come on to the Formula 1 stuff in a bit, which I'm sure everyone's excited to hear about. But why do you think you were so successful and so quick in a car and quick at progressing and adapting to new cars? What is it? Because now part of the problem now is there's loads of kids with loads of budget who can do loads of driving all the time. We've also got simulators, and we've got, we're much more clued up now about the mental side of things with mindfulness, with visualization, all of that stuff. But there wasn't as much stuff back then. So how did you train? How did you perform at an elite level? And how much work went into that? or was it just pure natural talent and natural drive?
Oh, natural. No, I mean, look, you've got to know how to drive. And as a one thing I learned, I guess, not straight away. I had to learn it. Was to piece the weekend together. So get the car in the window, work with the engineers. I was quite good at understanding what the car did, so I could translate that over to the engineer and go, right, the car's doing this and this. That experience started to build up. The belief in yourself that you can go and do it. I was very good at just focusing on what was next, not really bothered about what the future looked like. It was very much about what's happening now. And I think that took a lot of pressure off me because I was just focused on it, just doing the best I could, getting the maximum out of it. I think the training on the farm helped me to connect with the tyre, the contact patch, which is the most important to be connected to a race car. So I could feel the grip, and with each setup change, I could feel how that grip changed and how potentially I needed to go a certain direction to get even more grip and more confidence with the car. And yeah, I did used to, even back then, I used to visualize a lap in my head, I used to have a setup, sort of a system that I used every time I went out to qualify, which seemed to work for me.
What does that system look like?
Well, it changed later on, but it was, I took my time a little bit. I didn't worry too much about what the lap times were compared to everybody else. I just focused on, small steps, small changes, just getting the car into a better window. So when I went like this in qualifying, I had total trust in me and in the car. And that seemed to work really well for me.
I think the key, it sounds like you are extremely present in everything. So even when I asked the question, were you thinking of Formula One at Macau? You were like, no, I was just thinking of winning that race.
Oh yeah.
And when you're like, and you mentioned about the tires, feeling absolutely everything that's going on with the tires. We had a conversation with Enzo Mucci, who looks after Ollie Behrman and Liam Lawson. And we were talking about what separates the great drivers, and it's in the present moment, feeling everything rather than what our coach explains, what's called time traveling, where we're thinking about what's going to happen in the future. Like, want to make Formula One, want this result. Sounds like you've been very narrowly focused on each step.
Yeah, I mean, key. I didn't even then, Formula One just wasn't, I never sat there and, I thought, I'd love to be in Formula One, but that was it. I dropped it. Didn't think any more about it. It was just next race, next event, next practice session, next qualifying, get the most out of it, and if I look at my F3 career, that's what helped launch me over here, having, done so well in Formula 3, winning the F3 championship and Macau. And I think it was either just after Macau, I signed to do Formula 3000. So I thought, and it was a free drive and I was getting paid. So it was like, great, I was going to be Damon Hill's teammate.
Cool.
So everything was, by the time I got to Christmas, I kind of knew what I was doing the next year, but I'm thinking, 2 years in F3000 and I'll go to F1. But you got to remember, back in 89 and 90, there was a world financial crash. Everything collapsed. A Japanese guy had bought the Brabham Formula One team, but he also owned the 3000 team that I was driving for, Middlebridge. And Dave and I were about to test the brand new Lolas that we were getting. And they pulled us in and said, we're canning the F3000 team, literally just before, the first test, which was late. It wasn't that far away from the first race. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, so what do I do now? And then I was in the room with them. Damon wasn't there, but I was in the room, and they said, we want you to be in Formula One.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
How
not what I was expecting. Although, having said that, prior to that, and the first 2 rounds of the championship in 1990 in F1, the first round was Phoenix. And if you remember Senna and Jean Alesi having a good old dice at the front. That week I got a phone call from the team, Brabham F1 team. We'd like you to come over and race in the first round of the FIA World Championship in a Brabham at Phoenix. That took me by surprise. And I just didn't feel fit enough. You know, I was fit for F3, but, you know, when I started testing F3000, I knew I needed to up my game on the fitness. I wasn't fit enough, and I, you know, obviously hadn't driven the car, and I just felt like I was not going to maximize it properly, so I refused the offer.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, you refuse an F1 seat.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of people don't do, because a lot of people say, especially in this day and age, if you get the opportunity, you have to take it, prepared or not. So that
today, drivers are a lot better prepared than in my day. You know, no simulator, no, you know what I mean? The prep now is so good, where back then there was no prep other than what you were racing or testing, you know. Was
there not something inside of you that's like, shit, if I turn this down, then I might never get that opportunity again? No,
I didn't. I kind of felt I wasn't ready. I just stuck to that. You know what I mean? In fact, from having conversations later on with the team guys, they were like impressed that it was like, no, I'm not ready, but when I'm ready, I'll come. That kind of thing, you know. So when I'd done, you know, some F3000 testing, and that seemed to go quite well. I was quite fast, and then with the old Lola, and then the bombshell hit. You know, we want you to be in Formula One. So I started at San Marino Grand Prix in Imola, and that was my first race. And talk me through your first race
time.
Weekend, I should say.
Yeah.
Okay. And talk me through your first time sitting in a Formula One car and doing your first ever laps.
Yeah, I was at Silverstone, and it was in a Brabham BT58 that Sergio Rinland had designed, and that car had finished third at Monaco, I think with Martin Brundle or Stefano Modena, I can't remember. So the car was a good car. And when I tested it, I mean, it was mint. It was just unbelievable, this car. Not the fastest, but it was a good car. And my first test was at Silverstone, which was the old circuit, which obviously Stowe and Club were pretty flat. The old neck's like this, you know? Yeah. I mean, after 12 laps, that's it. I'm turning into the corner, my neck's just like that.
And no power steering.
I just wasn't
as well,
used
right?
to the sort of G-forces on my neck. Again, you know, the prep back then just wasn't like it is today. You know, a lot of these young kids would jump in and their neck would hold up a lot longer because they're preparing better. But back then we didn't prepare like that.
It's still stick shift then?
Yeah, H-pattern gearbox, yeah, heel and toe, boom, 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 you know, or you skip gears, you know, 6 down to third, second, or whatever, you know. So, yeah.
God, so how about the first race weekend then? What was that like?
Well, back then, the BT58, they raced the first 2 rounds, but then they had to bring the new car in because the regulations changed, safety regulations and other things. So we had a brand new car, which, to be fair, was a bit of a disaster. So I didn't see the car till the first practice, so I had to shake the car down. Every time I went out, the car stopped, so I'd miss a whole session. Next practice session, went out half a lap, car would stop. So back then you had 26 on the grid, but you had 30 drivers trying to get into the top 26. And it was like so close down the back. I didn't get a lot of laps, didn't really get a good feel for the car. I do remember when I did get going, my left-hand mirror just fell off. So I'm relying on, you know, the flag marshals to tell me, you know, if some someone's coming. I think the right side's vibrating so much you can't see anyway. And so I'm relying on the marshals. And of course, a Ferrari would go past me, go around the corner, and all the marshals are all looking around at the car, and there's no one flagging, and there's a car there, and it was all a bit like this. So I missed out on qualifying for the race by 0.3, I think. Yeah. So
as in hitting like the qualifying time.
Yeah, to get into the top 26.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so I think I was 27th or 28th or something like that. Yeah. And Michele Alboreto, he was a bloody good driver. He was, Ferrari F1. He was down the back there trying to qualify in a footwork. So, there was some really good drivers back there. Our machines just weren't fast enough.
Why was that, do you think? Because it was a time where financially there was a challenge, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah, we got to, like I said, the financial crisis back then in 89, 90, yes, it hit Japan a lot, and the owner was Japanese. I think he went from a billionaire to a millionaire overnight. So the budgets all of a sudden disappeared. I mean, I turned up, I think from halfway on, I didn't know if I was going to race the next race because the engines hadn't been paid for, all this sort of stuff. So I go to the workshop and I go, why haven't the cars left? Well, no one's paid for the engines yet. They won't release the engines. That happened nearly every race to the end of the season. So no development. The rear suspension, the rear gearbox, the gearbox and rear suspension designed for that car didn't turn up till halfway through the year. So we had to use the old suspension, which didn't quite match. So it was a bit of a cut and shut type thing. The main aerodynamicist had left to go back to South Africa. And even when Sergio Rinland's a really good friend of mine. And even then he said, I gave you the worst car I've ever designed. Really? Yeah. So, and it was unreliable.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why am I still friends with you? So I ended up having a difficult year, but my very first Grand Prix, I made it at Monaco. So I've qualified 25th out of 30. So I got through. And I'm sitting on the grid, my first F1 race at Monaco. My dad won there in 1959. The guys in 1985, I went to the Australian Grand Prix and got autographs of all the guys that are all up in front of me on the grid. Senna, Prost, Mansell, Piquet, Thierry Boutsen, Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell, all those guys that you looked up to as a kid. I'm sitting on the same grid as them, and you talk about that, how quickly it happened. It does show how, it happens even quicker now, doesn't it? But back then it was a very quick journey to F1.
Yeah. How, I don't want to gloss over how big of a deal getting into F1 is. We talked about it quite casually, but when you're first introduced to that scene, especially getting your first kind of qualifying for the Grand Prix at Monaco, and like you said, racing against these big stars, there's so much that comes to my head. One of the immense pressure you must have felt. All of a sudden you go from not being in the spotlight to massively in the spotlight. You're also carrying a last name that's very prestigious in the world of motorsport and Formula One. So
driving a Brabham.
Yeah, exactly. And that was going to be, I thought, nepotism's kind of coming into my mind about, was there noise about that? I have so many spin-off questions to that, but how did you feel going into Formula One, racing your first race? How did you manage that pressure, and how much of it did you feel? Was it overwhelming?
I think the pressure was more about performing more than anything else. And back then we had qualifying tyres for qualifying. So really sticky tyres. Imagine like an F1 car around Monaco and then put a set of qualifying tyres on. It's nuts, you know what I mean? And we were lucky. We had Pirelli didn't have the best race tyre, but they had a really good qualifying tyre. So that helped quite a lot. And we could shave the tyre and it would come back. And sometimes it'd be better that way or very close. So, it was a good tyre to try and qualify in. So, sitting there at Monaco, going through the streets with a set qualifying tyres and making it. You know, it was a massive relief in a way because I managed to qualify for my second race. But you're still focused on, you know, the pressure to perform, which, you know, I was good at putting a lot of pressure on myself to perform well.
Yeah. And did you find carrying the last name and racing with Brabham advantage or a disadvantage mentally for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I get asked that a lot. It's a double-edged sword, really. You know, it can be really good in one hand, and it can be, you know, a burden in the other. You know,
How so?
Just the expectations. You know, certainly when I first started racing, you know, this is an example. So my first Ford Laser race, Goodyear was sponsoring it. Dad was a Goodyear ambassador. He was on TV doing Goodyear ads, whatever. And we saw a press release come out before the race. David Brabham finished a credible whatever. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was my first race outside of a go-kart in a front-wheel drive car that I've hardly tested because it was such a late decision to do because I was going to do another year of go-karts, but an opportunity came up to do the Ford Laser Championship. And, it was... I've lost my train of thought now.
That's all right.
Okay, remind me again what we were saying.
About... It was just how, it was maybe...
Oh, the expectations, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this press release came out saying, you know, David Brabham finished a credible whatever, you know, and the expectations that because I was a Brabham, that I would just do well. And if I wasn't doing well, you know, he's not like his father, you know, it's
not nice to read that.
Yeah, you know, and, you know, it's a big shadow to race under, you know, not just me, but my brothers and the grandkids, you know, my son and Matthew, you know, you're under that huge sort of shadow of someone who achieved something that no one's ever achieved in Formula One, you know. So it can be difficult in sometimes, but you kind of got to forget that and just focus on the positives as well.
Because this is one of the hard parts of Formula One, right? Like before this year, there's not as much talk behind the scenes where it sounds like, and you see it even on the weekend, like Lando's being booed and all sorts. Like, not to let any of the conversation get into your head must be really tough.
Well, I mean, it's also the conversations you create in your own head.
Exactly, yeah.
That's the bigger problem. And then, you know, you learn as you get through your career how to deal with that better and better. But certainly at the beginning, I'd say in the Formula One time, with Brabham in particular, you know, with the team not being able to know whether we're going to make the next race, there's no testing. I'm getting the second-hand parts basically off my teammate Stefano Modena, who was more experienced. He'd done the year before with Brabham. He was the number one. I was the number two. I didn't know I was getting second-hand parts till, you know, mechanics told me further down the road when I worked with him in sports cars. So you're up against it quite a bit. And then you start doubting yourself. Then you start to go into a bit of a spiral. So not the best season for me. I learned so much though. Oh my God, I learned a lot about politics. I learned a lot about myself because I'd never been in that situation. You know, I would normally rock up and win a race. I haven't qualified. You know what I mean? It's like, God dear, this is a whole different world. And was I prepared for it? Well, probably not because it was the first time. But boy, I learned a lot though. I learned a lot.
And how do you maintain that self-belief when you've gone from winning all in your junior career? And I can kind of relate to this a bit, not on the same extent to you, but I've done like GT racing, Carrera Cups, and won races, won championships, and then went to Porsche Super Cup. And that's like the F1 of Porsche racing. For sure. Super, super competitive. And I was in a similar position. All of a sudden, it's not easy to go out and win anymore. It's, you know, I've qualified and one weekend I'm 19th.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh
and
my
how'd
God.
you deal with it?
How did I deal with it? I think partly I have had, say this year, the excuse of only doing Super Cup and not doing all these other championships that a lot of the top, say, 15 are doing. The other side of that is, okay, I haven't done X, Y, and Z. Here's been the standout results from this year when I have been fighting in the top 5, the top 6. You know, I was P1 in Monaco, practice for a little bit, and had a good qualifying at Monaco, a track where you can't test that. No matter who you are, you can't go to pay and shut down Monaco to test that. So those moments, you've got to take the small positives and go, okay, look, I am capable of this, because the doubts do creep in. Of course,
we're human.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we are human beings, and yeah.
But yeah, I suppose I look at those. I'm self-analytical, and I go, "There's this and this. These were good." Monza, for example, this year was a bad one for me in qualifying. Car was a couple of tenths slow in a straight line. Don't know why. Just that weekend it was in comparison to my teammate, and I was 4 tenths off pole and 19th.
Yeah.
So I said, it's not like the gap's a second and a half.
No, it's just when you see 19.
Yeah. You see P19 and then you think, oh my God, 1 tenth or 2 tenths would knock me up about 10 positions. But I think when I look at the gaps and when I look at it in a logical, realistic way, not in an emotional way, I know, delusionally maybe, but when I look at the facts, it's there. I just need proper prep. I need X, Y, and Z. Here's what I've got to do for 2026, and I will go out and win. But how did you manage that? It's a very different situation to Porsche Super Cup. Going into Formula One, you've won a lot of the things there is to win in junior Formula. You're this big name. You're David Brabham, son of Jack Brabham, and all of a sudden you're not qualifying for Grand Prix. Not from a talent issue, but you can't explain that to everyone.
No, you can't.
And it looks like you're making excuses, and I'm very aware of that when I talk about my year this year, for example. So, yeah.
Well, I think when I look at it, it's a shame the F3000 program didn't come next for me, because I think as a driver, I did really well in F3, and I had 100% belief I could win in Formula 3000. I really could. So it's a shame that didn't happen, and I got thrusted into Formula One unexpectedly, and I don't think I was as prepared as I would have liked. Obviously, I knocked back the first offer, but I had no choice in the second one because there was no more seats. So it was either F1 or sit on the sidelines. So obviously, I went towards the F1 thing, and as I said, the season was a tough one, and you learn a lot about yourself, which obviously helps you down the road to deal with situations, and the self-doubt, which crept in for sure, more so that year than I'd ever experienced before. And it wasn't till I actually went back to Formula 3000 the year after, and I did about 3-4 races, and then joined Jaguar in the World Sports Car Championship. So TWR, Tom Walkinshaw, Ross Brawn, all those guys fighting for a world championship, fantastic car, the Jaguar XJR 14. And, I jump in it, and all of a sudden, I'm fast again. Mm-hmm. And I'm comparing well to Derek Warwick and Teo Fabi, ex-F1 drivers and really good drivers. And I ended up winning my first race for them at the Nürburgring, where I was actually starting one car, finishing the other. So crazily enough, I finished first and second in my first World Endurance Championship race for Jaguar. And that was like, I can do this.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It was. Thank God I got into that situation. And that drive came about because I did the Jaguar XJR 15 series, which was 3 races: Monaco, Silverstone, and Spa. And the winner at Spa got $1 million. And I was asked to drive through Tom Walkinshaw to drive one of their customer cars that somebody else had owned. I think it was Samsung, the company Samsung owned it. And I finished second to Derek Warwick in this car at Monaco. And then they asked me to test the car, the Jaguar XJR 14. And when I got in that car, it was such a good car. It just lifted my confidence. And then when we went to the first race, I'm leading. straight away. I was behind Kiki Rosberg in a Peugeot. Teo was leading. Rosberg was dropping oil all over my screen. I had Michael Schumacher behind me in the Mercedes. And we're all going along. And anyway, Teo spun on the oil. Rosberg's engine blew. And all of a sudden, I'm in the lead. I can't see shit because the oil from the back of his car, which Michael had gone into the pits to try and clear, I was in front of him. So I'm like trying to look through gaps to see where the hell I'm going. And I'm leading my first, World Endurance Championship event with Jaguar. But that car just gave me that confidence and that self-belief again that, no, I can do this. The F1 stuff, with Brabham, it was up and down, really was up and down. And like I said, up until that point, I really didn't have that experience before where I had so much self-doubt going on. Come on, you got to do this. You can do it. And can you do it? It was a real learning experience for me.
And did you, looking back at Formula One now for you, did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were parts of it I did enjoy, for sure. Tell you what, it gives your ego a boost. Too much at times because, you look back and you go, yeah, didn't really like myself back then because, you're an F1 driver, you strut around like you're an F1 driver and it gets to your head a bit. That was another thing I'd never got, had experience of before. So it was a real mixed bag of stuff that I hadn't dealt with before, had never experienced, and had to learn how to deal with it quite quickly. Yeah.
You mentioned sorry, mate.
It's all right.
You keep going. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask about you mentioned that and your ego gets inflated. And I do think that about, your Antonellis now that are, and Behrmans that are like 18 going into F1. It's like, Jesus Christ, you guys won't struggle to get a girlfriend. Do you know what I mean? But how do you deal with obviously you've got this fame now, lots of people know you, lots of girls want you, you're getting a bit of money. Was that tough to manage? I know it doesn't sound like the hardest problem to have in the world, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, I think, other than, getting carried away with it a bit, I feel like I've been someone who's kept the feet on the ground. I've been with my wife since F3 days. So when we were in F1, in between the 2 years I did F1, we got married. And so it wasn't like I was a girl chaser or anything like that. I had a girl. So that I didn't have to worry about that. But, like I said, the ego can get in the way quite a bit at times. And you just got to learn how to deal with that. And as you get old, you get more mature and you learn how to, you sort of learn what's important to focus on because the other stuff's a distraction. And distractions only deplete lap time and consistency. And they force you, they help you make mistakes. So I learned fairly early on, going back to my F3 days, where I pretty much had a clear head, knew what I wanted to achieve, and I believed that I could achieve it, and just went through the process in the moment each time, and I had to get back to that.
Yeah, and the rest is just noise. Yeah,
the rest is noise. Yeah, which can be really distracting, and it depletes you as a person and as a driver.
Just on part of the noise, you mentioned politics. For listeners and watchers, could you explain what that means in the Formula One world, like the stuff that goes on behind the scenes? And
well, I guess from a team point of view, because that's what I dealt with most. When I went to Brabham, I'd say half the team were happy to have me, half the team weren't, because Brabham at that point was still quite an established team. They had done quite well the year before with, limited resources, but they had a really good car. They had some pretty good results. And back then, I was young in their eyes. So, I was 24. And 24 sounds old now. You know what I mean? But back then, I was inexperienced. I hadn't been in Formula One. Do you really deserve to be here? It was that was the kind of attitude that I walked into So I didn't really know who was friend or foe. You know, it was like, what the hell's going on here? Because I'd never experienced that before. So to try and learn how to navigate that side of it, as well as a team under pressure because they don't know if they're going to race, guys don't know if they've got their jobs. You know, the whole thing spirals out of control. And like I said, it was a good experience for me to take forward into the future, to learn how to help manage teams, you know, try and bring them closer together, get the goal clear in everybody's heads of what they're trying to achieve, and we go out and we get it done. Where back then it was, you know, a lot of things going on. Like I said, you know, the guys, are they going to get paid? You know, are we going to the next race? And as a mechanic or an engineer or even a driver, it's unsettling. It unsettles everybody. And, you know, we as a team had to learn how to deal with that.
And what's the result of improving with that? Because we see it now, people talking about Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, who's going to be the team leader when they have a car that's capable of winning races.
I think that's clear now, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's we'll see. I think, is that a case of, is it like the fine details of staying, the team being motivated enough to stay an extra hour at night to work on the car, the pit stops having more intensity? Is that the sort of thing that these things, managing it well, builds up towards?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in, let's say, two scenarios. One, like the Brabham situation, where no one really knows what's going on. People are being pulled in all sorts of directions. And when I think back and think of the energy in the team, and I think energy is a really important thing to be aware of, not only yourself, but your teammates and the team as well. So you fast forward and you go into another successful situation like I did the year after with the Jaguar team, and I've got F1 drivers I'm up against, and you know, you've got Ross Brawn at the head of the engineering. It was the last race car he ever designed, and this thing was 3 seconds quicker than everyone else when it first came out. This thing was just insanely good. And you walk into that environment, everyone knows what they're doing, everyone knows they're going to get to the end of the season. Everyone's highly motivated. They're out there to prove a point. The energy is very different, very different. And I guess for me, I learnt a lot in relation to the different teams I raced for. And if the energy wasn't right, how do I get that energy to be on song so people could do their job properly, make the right decisions, and achieve the goals, you know? So that was a great, you know, I look back, I think the Brabham experience was a wake-up call that this world exists, but also it helped me in the future in helping teams become what they could be.
Yeah, you hear that a lot with drivers that have matured a lot in the world of Formula One, where as drivers we can sometimes, but in our careers, especially building up through the junior categories, especially before I went into GTs, I felt very self-absorbed. Like I felt like the world, you know, was centered around me. It's just like an immaturity thing we have, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, stuff just happens, doesn't it? Your race car turns up, you don't think about how it's got there, who's been prepping it, whatever.
And you don't care.
No,
you just want to get in and go fast.
It's not that, like, if someone reminds you of it, you care, and you're like, oh, you know, we always say thank you to mechanics or whatever, but it's something I've learned as well going through, especially now that I've coached all of this year an American team and I've done the hours that they've done, and not seeing the workshop stuff, but the amount of the hours of work that go in by those mechanics is crazy. And if they don't, it does make a big difference. If they don't, like you and have a good relationship with you, they'll do what they need to do, but they won't go the extra mile to make sure that car will win races. Especially if you're not then motivating them with your talent, which puts a pressure on us as well. Like the more talented you are, the better chance there is of a good result. The harder the mechanics work, etc. But I've experienced.
It's also how you treat them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I know that Michael Schumacher had a big emphasis on team morale. Yeah. Whether it was, I'm not gonna assume otherwise, but whether it was fabricated a little bit, like, okay, I need to spend whether it's strategic, like I need to spend lots of time with the team and I need to do this and I need to buy them beers after they've done this or whatever. He was very on it, I've heard, with making sure the team, at least his side of the garage, were on his side You know, he gave them the time of day. He was nice to them. He was generous to them, etc. Because so much work goes on behind the scenes that I never experienced properly until this year. And you know, you could write off the car in Carrera Cup, for example. You could basically write off the car in race 1, and then 6 hours later by race 2, it's fixed. And you don't, as a driver, it's stupid, but you don't think about that. That's ridiculous. But sorry, going on a tangent a little bit.
No, but it's important. You know, it's motorsport, isn't it? Where it's such an important part of the game. You know, the mechanics, the engineers, the hard work behind what everybody does has an influence on you as a driver, and vice versa. You know, and because let's face it, as a driver, when that car is sat on the ground ready for you to get in it, where's everybody's eyes? They're on you as a driver. So you have a responsibility for all that hard work that they've put in to deliver. And if you deliver, you'll get their respect. They'll start buying into you, and you start treating them properly as humans, but also in a performance-driven way. They will respond, you know, because that's why they're there. They want to go racing. They want to win. And you have to tap into that and take that energy up. And if you can do that, you can achieve a lot. Yeah.
I think a big thing for me that I've learned as well, and that John, our coach, has instilled in me, is like a no bullshit attitude. Be honest with yourself and with the team, because I think I've developed really good relationships with engineers over the years. By a lot of drivers will come in after they've underperformed in qualifying or something and go, car shit, this, that, the other, everything, you guys are useless, whatever. Maybe not that bad, but they'll blame the car, it's this, it's that. But whenever I was in that situation, again, I looked at it like, what are the facts? Was the car capable of pole? Yes. Did I get it? No. And I come in and I'm like, sorry guys, car was great, leave it as it is. Or that then leaves them to respect you way more when you do give feedback one weekend and you're P10 or whatever. You're like, that's a really good lap. I'm sorry guys, we're lacking 2 or 3 tenths in the car. They then listen to you, and I'm sure you've had the same experiences as well throughout your long career.
For sure. If you think about it in this way, do you like someone lying to you?
No.
I mean, it's a very simple thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, I work with drivers, we manage drivers, develop drivers, and the honesty aspect is a really important topic. You have to be honest with yourself, but also don't be frightened to express that with the team around you, because they would much rather have an honest driver than one that either deflects the blame, causes a situation where the team will lose faith in that driver, and that happens very quickly if the performances are low. You know, they're not reaching expectations. You're not winning. You're down the back or mid pack, and there's a lot of complaining by a driver. That's like a virus in the team. You know, it really is, because all of a sudden the team start to separate mentally from that driver, and that's a problem.
It's probably even small things like just having a conversation with the team and engineers saying, oh, by the way, in the race, I can get a bit heated with my communication. It's nothing personal. It's just in the car. I get like that. Even just having that conversation, because otherwise people take it personally. You know, people do take it personally.
But if it can be viewed as passion.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, I was always a bit like this, but there were peaks. Like, if something really pissed me off, I would be on the radio. I'd be shouting, screaming, swearing, whatever. But it wasn't a negative towards the team. It might be that I'm blowing off a bit of steam because I need to, but I'm passionate about it. That also gets respect from the team around you as well, you know, because if you're out there giving it like, and they can see the lap times, they can see the consistency, the risks you're taking and the calculated risks, particularly in sports cars with traffic and things like that.
Yeah.
And you blow your top, but you're still performing. It's okay, you know.
Yeah, it'd be very strange if someone, oh, no worries, guys, it's okay. We'll get them next time.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it depends. Sometimes I think I look back and I go, there was probably once I crossed the sort of the line a little bit, mainly from frustration. And I realised it, and I apologised to the team. I said, no, that wasn't good enough. I apologise and whatever. And that wasn't because, I need to say sorry because I know that will help. It was genuine, and that has more gravitas than thinking you've got to say something, because you know what? People aren't stupid. They know whether you're genuine or not.
And then going back to Formula One with your career, F1 happened again the following season.
Yep. No, from 90 to 94 was the next time I went into Formula 1.
That's it. Yeah, sorry.
3-year gap.
With Simtech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you had the gap in sports cars where you felt at home again.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting because that's not really that common nowadays, is it? To mix Formula One with sports cars,
No.
apart from Max, obviously, this year, who did a phenomenal job, obviously.
Yeah, obviously saw what I did in the past.
Yeah, no, yeah, you inspired it. Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
So, actually, I want to talk about sports cars before the stint in Formula One again, because I want to also, for our audiences, understand what it's truly like to drive at Le Mans, let alone win the race, just to complete the actual race, because I don't think people quite understand the effort that goes into it and the challenge mentally, physically, and on the car.
Well, you sort of took me back to my first Le Mans, which is 1992. So I was racing for Toyota in the World Endurance Championship, although I started, my first race for them was Le Mans, so I missed a few of the races because they had another driver who unfortunately was killed in an accident in Japan. So he was like Toyota's love child. I mean, he was the hero for them, and he passed away, and they needed a replacement. Because I'd done sports cars in 91, I got slotted in. So when I got to Le Mans, I wasn't in the best of shape because I lost my hearing in my right ear and I lost my balance prior to going to Le Mans. So, and when I say I lost my balance, I mean, if I did that, everything went like this.
Oh, jeez.
Because for the viewers, if you don't know, your ears have a massive bearing on balance, which I didn't know until I had like an ear infection or something. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, so I couldn't walk in a straight line. So I was dealing with that situation, trying to keep my career alive. Went to Le Mans as a third driver for Toyota in the car with Jeff Lees. I'm trying to remember who the other one was. And as a third driver, you don't get a lot of laps, because the top guys are trying to focus on getting the car right, and you're in the background. And again, no simulators to learn the circuit, and I didn't know it until I drove out on track. So by the time I got to the race, I was still learning the circuit, and but we had an accident on the first lap. It was absolutely bucketing down with rain. There was an accident on the start down the Mulsanne. Our car was involved. So by the time it came back, it was on three wheels. And by the time we went back out, we're like, I don't know, 40 laps behind. I went out in the dark. It was still bucketing with rain and thick fog. I didn't get out of third gear on my outlap.
Scary.
I didn't know. I couldn't see. I didn't know where I was going. There was no safety car. You think about the mental challenges of Le Mans. When you think about you're a rookie at Le Mans, you don't know the track that well. You're still learning the car. And you can't see. The only thing is no one passed me. That's how bad it was. So
Third gear, by the way, at Le Mans is pretty nuts.
yeah, it is third gear.
Because-
I just couldn't see.
Did they have the
thick
chicanes
fog.
back then up the back
Yeah,
straight?
yeah, we did have the
you
chicanes.
did, okay.
Yeah, I never raced at Le Mans without the chicanes. So from a mental side, you're dealing with that. Obviously, one mistake, it's the end of the race.
And potentially the end of your life or an injury.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I never really thought about the safety side of it. It's one good thing about, I think, when I look back in my career, I didn't make safety a sort of this, but I never really thought about it. just focused on doing what I had to do. Because I think if you do think too much about that, it slows you down.
100%.
Yeah. So I knew then, that's what I tried to do in my career, look at things and go, if I think like that, what's that going to do? That's going to slow me down. So an example, like, racetracks around the world, what's your favorite? Didn't have them. Why? Because I wanted to be exactly the same every time I hit a racetrack. If I had a favorite, I'd be good there, maybe less good. That's not good enough, But going back to Le Mans, the mental stress and physical stress you have to go through that entire race is insane. Insane. From early days of not knowing where to go in third gear, absolutely like scared.
Even if you're just on a
motorway. I just didn't know where to go, I went off on the grass through the two kinks out the back from Mulsanne corner. That first kink, I went straight onto the grass, back on again on my first lap. And then fast forward to, the Aston Martin days, and you're 74 degrees inside the cockpit temperature, and you're having to deal with that, which is insanely hot,
That's Celsius, by the way.
Celsius, that is Celsius, yeah, exactly. So you learn how to pace yourself. You learn. I always raced at Le Mans at sort of, I'm going to say 9.5 tenths, 9 tenths. Always had that little bit of margin in case I needed it to, miss a piece of bodywork on the track or something. It was always just that little bit tamed down, but fast enough to win, but just, managing that side of it, because you could come around the corner, hit oil, or, it's wet down one side or it's not the other. It throws all sorts of stuff at you. So at a drive, you've got to be so aware of all of that and know how to adapt to everything that's coming out without the pressure of the lap time. The pressure of the lap time.
Just hard to do as a driver.
Forces you to make mistakes. And I think my time at Peugeot was a fantastic example of that.
So how do you deal with that when you've got a car chasing you down who's a bit quicker and you're managing that though? You see what I mean? Like if you're managing your pace at 9 tenths, like you said.
You can only do the best you can.
Yeah.
With what you got. And if someone's going faster than you and they get past you, well, they're quicker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't mean to say later on in the race or whatever, and like a Le Mans race, it's a long one. Situations change. Back then we had a little bit more choice on tyre. Whether we have a soft or a medium or a hard or stuff like that. So in the night, what's your car like on the tyre? Can you run a softer set for a bit longer? So, sometimes someone will be quicker than somebody else because of the situation. And that situation can change later on. So you still got to have that belief that it will still come good. Because if you think otherwise, what do you got? You got a hurdle in front of you. You've just literally put up a hurdle. And I tried to always try and reduce the hurdles in my head, but also with the team and everyone around, because as you know, we can create hurdles in our head that makes it a little bit more difficult for ourselves.
I think with you, a lot of the stuff you say, maybe without even meaning it, just is so similar to what our coach, my John, says to me. Is like about being in the present, not thinking about future or past, and about just in those times when you're really under pressure, focusing on the process and not getting emotional about whether is someone catching me, is someone I need to catch this person ahead, I need to get past them. If you focus on that's being goal orientated, I can't let this person pass, I have to win this race, rather than being like, if you focus on the process corner by corner, getting every braking zone perfect, you're then making that is how you're going to reach your goal. Focus on the journey, the process of what you're doing, and not consciously under pressure thinking about your driving. I think I'm sure have it, and you've had it 100%, where your best qualifying laps or your best races are the ones where you're in that flow state, where it's pure subconscious driving. And whenever I've thought for a moment about, there's subconscious thought in a way of like, okay, I did that corner, next lap I need to brake a bit later and take a bit more corner speed, whatever. But whenever I've thought about, okay, brake here, turn here, or I need to do this, I need to do that. That's automatically when the mistakes start coming in, or when I start.
And you'll go slower.
Yeah. Or when you start mirror watching, etc., on the car behind, that's
self-awareness. That's where self-awareness is really important, because when you notice that stuff, it's like, okay, reset, get back in the moment, and off you go again.
100%. And coming back to Le Mans, can you just give us an idea? Because I don't hear it from many drivers, and I don't really know, even being very involved in the racing world. First-hand experience for you. How does that race play out in terms of, you've got 3 drivers per car? When do you sleep? How long are your stints? How many times are you getting in the car? And, that must be part of the physical aspect, as well as just it's difficult to drive those cars for an hour or 2 straight. What do your stints look like? How did the race play out?
In terms of the amount of time you spend in the car, that really depends on tyres and fuel. How many laps can you get on a tank of fuel? The tyres, sometimes I've done Le Mans where you're changing tyres, either every stint or, 2 stints or 3 stints. I mean, I think the longest I've ever been at Le Mans in a car was like 3.5 hours, maybe.
That's still a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, and that was because the tyres could do 3.5 hours on one set. So it was literally come in, fuel, go, fuel, go, fuel, go, change tyres, change drivers. It took several attempts. I did 18 Le Mans, and I guess after maybe even like 30%, 40% of my time at Le Mans, I started to realize what really worked for me in terms of sleeping. And I was lucky, I could always sleep. If I need to sleep, I sleep. But it was power naps. So like 20-minute, half an hour power nap in between stints was more than enough for me to be alert and ready to go and be able to do the stints with a clear head and focused and everything. If I did more than that, I got quite tired. I looked like death. Walking towards the car, trying to wake up, And yes, we had bikes, sitting there on the bike and trying to, get your body warm and everything. But if I had any more, than half an hour, it was not good for me. So I would always, when I felt tired, I'd write 20 minutes, boom, and then get going again. It also depends how well you're doing. Because if you're 40 laps behind, you've got no chance, but you're just trying to finish.
You have a line.
You tend to lie in a little bit more. But when you're, at the sharp end and you've got to be focused, I found the power naps were more than enough, yeah.
How about the mechanics, though? Whenever the camera pans to them, they're typically sleeping in the chair in the garage, right? Yeah. They don't go back.
Well, they won't have long in terms of sleeping. They're like power naps, I would say, more than having a 2-hour sleep in the pits. They're drifting off, and which is good. They should be doing that. Just to reboot the brain.
One thing, speaking to the engineers I've been working with this year whilst coaching, they've done 24-hour races, and I've never thought about the engineers are the people that can't take a break.
Yeah.
Okay? The mechanics have to be alert, and there'll probably always be someone awake to wake them up.
Yeah.
If
probably the engineer.
Yeah,
because they're awake.
But I was like, when do you guys sleep? He was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't. We're one thing, especially the strategist, the engineer, the strategy guy, they definitely can't do anything. So you've got the kind of car engineers that sort out the setup on that and this and little tweaks here and there that probably don't have to be as alert during the race. But the strategist, things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
Might be a safety car here, there might be a red flag, there might be this, there might be that, it might start raining. Like, they don't sleep at all. They're up for more than 24 hours because the race usually starts at 1 or 2.
Well, they get up early in the morning to get to the racetrack. Race doesn't start till the afternoon, and depending on also what's happened in practice and qualifying. If they've had to repair a car and it's taken them a long time to do it, they may have not slept properly at all for 2 days. And then they're into a 24-hour race. I've seen that happen before as well.
Does the strategy get a bit questionable at like hour 20?
Well, I mean, you know, those engineers you're talking about, they've got information in front of them. They are engaged the whole time. A mechanic, the car leaves, they get themselves organised for when the car comes back in again, and they got a bit of downtime. And the engineers, data guys, they don't have that privilege. So, but as a driver, you do your stint, you get out, another driver gets in, you go. I used to, you know, go back and have something to eat, have a shower, sort of get myself organised, and if I needed a sleep, I'd go off and have a sleep because I had downtime. The engineers don't have downtime. You know, literally, they are engaged 24 hours. Bang. Hard to sleep.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I want to talk a little bit on. We'll come back to the sports car side of things, because what was quite unique in your story is how you went back to Formula One. Was because I'm interested why you went down that direction, because you've gone to sports cars, you felt so at home, yet you go into Formula One once again. Why?
Unfinished business, I guess.
Thought you'd say that.
Yeah. Because, you know, when I did F3, I was successful at F3 and went to F1. It didn't go as I thought it would go. Obviously, there were a lot more problems that were ahead of me that I didn't know. And when I finished the year, I felt like I'd learnt a lot, but I wasn't given the tools really to do what I felt I could do. And so I went off to sports cars, really enjoyed that, but there was still a burning desire to get back to Formula One. I still felt there was enough in me to be able to do that. And then the SimTech opportunity came up. Yes, it was a new team, so there was going to be lots of challenges, but I was older, I was more experienced, and I was always up for a challenge, and that was a great challenge. So off I went and did the SimTech year.
And did you feel from the ground running there was more of a chance of being competitive comparing to this year you had before?
No, it was more or less something for the future, to be more competitive. I knew going into that situation, you know, Nick Worth was 28, I was 28. Nick Worth was the owner and the designer, all right? So quite young Formula One team. But ambitious, loved a challenge, and that was a huge undertaking for a small team like that to go Formula One racing. And I enjoyed it. I you know, even though it was a difficult year, I mean, I was always slightly ahead of the guys at the back in terms of Pacific were there as well with Keith Wiggins. We had a slightly quicker package. Sometimes my teammates didn't quite qualify, but I was always consistent, and I had that experience. So I could be the sort of the number one lead in the team and help the guys around me, even my teammates, because I knew in sports cars, actually, if you work better as a group, you're going to achieve more. So it wasn't a case of like it was in my junior categories. It was all about, as you said, it's all about me. It's all about me, and then you realize actually it's about us. And then when you utilize that, you can achieve more. So I was more than happy to help whoever my teammate was, and I had a few of them that year because I felt that was going to help what we were trying to achieve for the future, which was a more competitive package in year 2, 3, or 4.
Who were your teammates that year, first year?
Well, obviously Roland Ratzenberger, who obviously sadly passed away in Imola, and then Jean-Marc Gounon, Mimo Schiattiella, Andrea Montemini, Taki Inui. So I had a few.
How do you, just like you touched on it once or twice with drivers having bad crashes or passing away, and we've also touched on the fact that you don't think about the safety aspect, which we can relate to now, although the cars are much safer, until you're about to have a crash, basically. And I think that's what makes good drivers, because if you're scared about it, you won't perform. But it must hit you, like smack you in the face when something like that happens, especially on a weekend that you're at. How do you feel when something like that happens? And does the doubt or the safety aspect not start to become very prominent in your head?
Yeah, I would say, obviously with Roland's death, for me and for the team, other than one other engineer had ever experienced that before. So it's a whole new experience, whole new game. The emotions are running away with everything. You don't really, it's a lot of fog. You're not clear about what you're doing, how you're doing it. You start to then question everything. For me, I had to make a decision. Do I race on Sunday or do I not race on Sunday? And that was a tough decision. I did it only because I felt after the warm-up, which I said, okay, let me just do the warm-up and see how I feel. I did the warm-up. And for whatever reason, they probably put me on empty tanks, but we were quicker than we would normally be. And I came in the pits and noticed that this extremely dark cloud over everyone had lifted ever so slightly after that run. And I thought, I've got to keep this going. Roland would be saying, look, what are you doing? I would. What are you doing? If it's safe, get going, And that's how I sort of played it in my head and raced to try and keep the team going, try and keep that whole energy going as we had planned at the very beginning of the year. So I did the race, and that wasn't an easy decision because your head is just all over the place.
That's where having that leadership was a real testing weekend, I suppose, wasn't it? Like to have the courage to keep going. And I suppose like in between the races, in between driving sessions was probably when that cloud was down, because it's on everyone's minds.
Yeah.
Maybe when you get in the car and you're focused on the next apex, I suppose that's something that.
And I also thought at the time, the team's just lost a driver, and the front wing came off, and for me it was, if I had said no, that also would be a little bit of a kick in the guts to the team, because I had no faith in the team as a whole. So me saying, all right, let's do this, put a belief back into the team that someone believed in them.
Yeah.
And I felt that was an important part as well for me to make that decision to go and race.
And how did you perform in that race? Did it surprise you, the lack of thought you put to it whilst driving? Did it completely leave your mind, or was it a performance constantly with a bit more of a worry than you previously would have had?
Good question. I think I was able to block it out enough to drive, except for the adrenaline was I've never felt so much adrenaline going through my body, to the point where, my right foot on the accelerator flat out, and it's literally jumping up and down. I have no control of my leg. It is literally bouncing up and down like this, with me trying to keep my foot flat on the pedal. So I was fighting that, as well as Eric Bernard, who was behind me trying to get past me in a Ligier. And luckily that fight kept my mind I'm at a racetrack and I'm racing, So, that was an interesting run. I'd never felt adrenaline like that. I just couldn't control it. But at that dicing I was having, because he was quicker on the straight and I was slightly quicker in the corner, so I was blocking him like crazy. I would have been 5-second penalty for blocking back in those days. Like if it was
really?
Today, it was
Really?
pretty
It was
bad.
aggressive.
Oh yeah, it was like, no, you're not getting past me, And and then I had a steering column failure in the car, which wasn't good.
Really?
Yeah.
Which corner was that?
Luckily, it wasn't a corner. I'd just gone through a corner.
Okay, you started to feel it.
Well, it just literally detached itself like that. So,
shit.
Jeez.
Did you have any? Sorry, I haven't looked into this, but have you had any terrifying moments yourself where you thought that was going to be the end for you in a race car?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, you know, when a steering wheel detaches itself, that's not a great feeling.
Suboptimal.
Yeah. Even if I was going through an accident, my dad always said to me, never, ever give up in an accident. See what you can do to make sure you minimize the impact or the crash or whatever. Just do what you can. Because obviously in his day, people died all the time.
Yeah.
So for him, he was always, he understood the car so well because, you know, he kind of built it. So he would just drive that car. He knew what was going on. If something happened, he knew what it was instantly, and he knew how to, you know, correct the car or pull it off to a stop, or if it's spinning, he kind of knew what to do. So he was always on to me, like, never give up in an accident. And that stayed with me. So whenever I've been in an accident, if even there has been times where I've had an accident, I'm trying like crazy to get it into a position, and I get out of the car, there's no wheels. So, okay, well, that was doing nothing, wasn't it? That's happened a couple of times. And even at Silverstone in the SimTech testing, going down Hanger Straight, we tried a new rear geometry change, and when I hit the brake, the rear wishbone pulled out of the gearbox, and round I went, and I hit the gravel trap. And back then you had a big lip like this with the gravel. So it was like a launch pad at that speed.
Yeah.
So next thing I know, I'm going backwards. I hit the gravel. I'm flung into the air. I go through the middle of a Foster's sign, Stowe, literally chipboard everywhere. Yeah. I end up upside down, up against the wall. But all the way through that, I never thought, oh, this is it. It was like, okay.
I'm crashing.
It's a crash. You know? And then the best part about this story was I got in the car, drove to the hospital, and my son was born that day.
Wow. No way.
Yeah. So,
should have called him Foster's.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm late, dear. You know,
sorry, been
all right, you can have the baby now.
That's amazing.
So how was your coming back to it after the depression session on crashing, etc.? How was your second stint in Formula One?
As a driver, a lot better, for sure. I felt like, I think only once I got out qualified, which I think was Monza. But I felt as a performance in a Formula One car much better than I was, obviously, in 1990, having done the sports car experience. And I moved from being the junior driver to a lead driver in SimTech. So that puts a different responsibility and mindset to the whole game as well. So it prepared me well for the 94 season. Yeah.
And then I just wanted to touch on briefly the period of time in between when you went back to sports cars. Was there any part of you, one, going back to Formula One and exiting Formula One, going to sports cars, that thought, let's say exiting Formula One for the first time, did you think, and I don't think this, but did you think, I'm a failure, like this hasn't worked out, I've, you know, made a fool of myself or whatever, and this, you know, I'm a failure basically? Was that ever like a self-doubt you had going back to sports cars? And then coming back in, was there an added pressure like, shit, if it's unfinished business, but if I go out there and it's really tough, I'm doing it all again? Do you know what I mean? Was there any of that?
Welcome to being a racing driver.
Yeah.
You know, because I think most drivers go through that, you know, if they've had a tough year and self-doubt starts coming in. And you can, you know, like I say, self-awareness is really important, but, you know, the people around you, it's important that people are honest with you as well, because if they're seeing something in you that's not right, they should say it. because you can ignore it. You know it's there, but you're kind of pushing it aside and you're not dealing with it. So for me, getting back in the F3000 car, I felt I drove, as well as I could there after the F1. And then obviously when I went to the sports cars and got into what I would say a top-level professional race team, it just took you to a whole new level as well. So that's really got my confidence back when all of a sudden, I'm fast in the Jag, comparable to my teammates, and it gives you a big confidence boost, and you carry that on. But certainly was like this, up and down, leading to that after I'd exited. That during the 1990 season, as well as just afterwards. So just something you've got to learn how to deal with.
And across your whole, performance-related question, across your whole career, including Formula One, what do you think your biggest weakness was and your biggest strength?
Good question. I think there were times in my career I look back and I was too worried about what I thought other people thought. And then when then you kind of out there in that space, then you go back to the space where you are in the moment more, as we talked about earlier, going through the process, staying in the moment as much as possible, let the noise disappear, then you get back to your best you. But as soon as you start worrying about what other people might think, that to me led to me worrying about what I was thinking and being negative towards myself. So I'm still a human, and I've had my battles through my career, and even still do. There are times when you're in situations, a bit of self-doubt comes in, and you got to remind yourself, actually, no, to get back on point, So you're always having this. Unless you're Max Verstappen, he kind of looks like he doesn't have any of these issues, does he? But even when you're looking at other Formula One drivers, they're up and down with their emotions and their confidence, and it's just a human thing,
And your biggest strength?
I think the resilience and learning about that self-awareness, learning about you're a human being, you have human tools you've been given. If you use them in a certain way, you can achieve what you want to achieve. If you use those tools in a different way, you're not going to achieve. And that whole process in my career, just learning more about myself and learning more about how those things work, was good for me. It helped me, and it helps me working with drivers because I see it straight away. See it straight away.
I was going to ask about drivers you work with. What's the most common mistake you see with different drivers on their progression to becoming a professional driver? If there was one thing that is like a common denominator of this is why they're struggling, what is that, do you think?
I think, my experience, that varies a lot. It's not just one thing. It could be one thing one day, it could be one thing the next.
Yeah.
You can tell by the way the drivers will talk about a situation or talk about themselves. You can see them interacting with the team, the way they talk about their car. You just know, okay, no, this ain't going to work. That's just going to create a problem. So let's just little tweak, little change of thinking, head over there. Because I love the data, but for me, it's not about the data. It's about the individual. So when I work with drivers, it's working inside out.
Absolutely,
if you know what I mean. So, and through my whole experience of everything that I've learned with, I've driven with so many teams, so many teammates, really good teammates, but I've driven in situations where it's toxic, the environment's toxic, and you can see the problems that causes. And then you see a team that is so in harmony with itself, it is achieving well above what it should be achieving. And those things fascinate me. They really do. And, you know, I had enough experience where I can walk into a race team and know whether it's going to work or not pretty quickly. Just by the energy, just by the way people think, the way the communication's happening. You just know. You just know that this is a team that's going to struggle, or this is a team that's, it's on the right course, but kind of needs a bit of tweaking here and there. Same with the drivers.
What was, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you as well, what's your advice to, we've talked about people in racing right now.
Yeah.
You've seen, obviously, you've been involved with motorsport in the 90s, 2000s, but how does someone, do you see nowadays getting into the world of racing? Like, obviously, we've got the rise of sim racing, of course, which you've got involved with.
Yeah.
If you're a farmer, you haven't a farmer, like a normal like student, you've done a bit of rental karting. How do you enter the sport nowadays, do you think? What's the best route?
There's so many different routes. It's hard to say. I think if you're asking me what would the advice be, be clear about where you want to get to. Don't worry about how you're going to get there, because life will take you in all sorts of directions, and sometimes you think you're going the wrong way. But when you look back retrospectively, actually, it was probably the best thing for you, and that's where the opportunities came next. Obviously, you know, it's an expensive sport and you need money. So if you haven't got money, you've got to go and find the money. But sitting at home ain't going to find you the money. You've got to get out there. You've got to knock on people's doors, and it may not come out right when you're talking to them to begin with. You know, you don't quite know what to say, and the experienced business guy's looking at you going, yeah, you got a bit to learn, mate. Come back when you've when you've done it. But you know, you keep at it and you keep getting better. Opportunities can come. You know, I mean, just look at the sport. Either you pay your way through, or somehow, you know, a sim driver's, you know, being picked up and being noticed, gets in a car and performs really well, and then the next thing happens and off you go. You know, it's so hard to know what the future is, and the way it's mapped out. We don't know how it's mapped out, but you've got to have that drive, that passion, that energy, and just we're so easy to put the barriers up. You know, oh, it's difficult. Well, yeah, well, life's going to make it difficult for you if you think it's difficult. You know,
I think the two things I've taken from what you've just said are resilience and putting yourself outside your comfort zone. I think so many people don't want to do things because they're scared of embarrassing themselves or getting no's, or I think that's a lot of what it comes down to, actually. I think, like, whether it's, like we've said before, starting a business or social media, it's always, what if this, what do my friends think about this, what, you know, what if I'm a failure, what if I'm an embarrassment. But it needs to be, like, if you're going to do anything, whether it's business, whether it's social media, whether it's being a professional athlete, it has to you have to be looking for no's. You have to be looking, like, whether it's looking for sponsorship, you have to almost be excited when you get a no and some constructive criticism. You get out there, be shit in the meetings and at presenting, because you will be when you first start. Like, I was pretty terrible at trying to find sponsorship when we first started racing, and only now me and my sister started to find, and my dad, a formula that's starting to really work for us and have a consistent fund that is now growing and growing.
Yeah, but you didn't know that when you started.
I had no idea.
No idea,
Absolutely,
but you've got to learn
idea.
it, haven't you?
And no idea how much work it would take. It's not sending an email and having one meeting. Oh, cheers, mate. There's $100,000.
Yeah.
It's so much harder than that. It's a proper business, and if you're not willing to do that, then the sport isn't for you. And it's the resilience as well. The more no's you get, the more it's easy to go. Similar to if racing's going badly, you're underperforming, or the team's underperforming, it's easy to just go, oh, what's the point in this? I'm just going to give up and have a normal life, get a normal job.
Yeah, and you know, when I think back, you know, with lots of drivers I've worked with, and some drivers are like, well, just give me the money and I'll go racing. You know, and if you think the person on the other side, they have a business, they have responsibility, they've got to grow their business. They want to see what the value is you're going to bring.
Yeah.
Where are the opportunities to help me grow my business? You know what I mean? But I know in the past there's been a lot of drivers like, well, just give me $100,000 so I can go racing, and I'll put your sticker on the car. Yeah, it just doesn't quite work like that.
It's always a value exchange.
Yeah,
you have to always say, what's in it for them? Always. And I think drivers, and I know I was like this as well. I thought, well, if I'm fast, that's valuable enough, no? But in the early days, it's
Which
not.
is easy to think.
It is.
You know what I mean? It is. And when I think back in my career, I think, God, how lucky I was, because when I came to England, it was a free drive. Camel cigarettes were sponsoring sons of famous drivers. I was one. It got me into Vauxhall Lotus, and then that moved me to F3. And then 5 of us went for a seat at Bowman Racing. And the interesting thing about that story is I came to England. I didn't know what Jewson was. They were the sponsor. And when we were told the sponsor called Jewson was going to be sponsoring this car and we're all going to go for a shootout at Silverstone, we had to do the driving and we had to sit in front of the MD and he asked us one question: what's Jewson? Now, prior to that...
You're like, shit.
Juice company.
I don't know.
Well, put it this way. When I was told it was Jewson, I said, I don't know who Jewson is. Can you give me some information? So they gave me some information. I walked into a shop, into a Jewson store. Oh, okay. This is Jewson. I've never been in one. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting in front of the MD and there's Rob Wilson. He was doing the driver stuff and, the team guys, and the MD's at the other end and I'm at this end, as the driver, sit there, MD right in front like you are. And he said, right, tell me what Jewson is. And I went, oh, shit. and it just came to me. And I don't know where it came from. And it was just like, well, when I think of Jewson, I think of a home. And he just sat back and he went, good answer. and one of the marketing people said, hey, should we use that as a marketing thing? Like this? The other 4 drivers, do you know what the other 4 drivers said?
What?
Don't know.
Right, okay.
I thought someone's like juice.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
None of them knew what it was.
What was it?
Juicing.
I don't know what
No,
it
but
is.
what is it?
You haven't been into a juicing
Sorry.
store?
Well,
No.
I'm prepared now if I go to a shootout and then the top sponsor. But no, I don't know what they are.
Home stuff,
Home.
like kitchens and tools and
Is that
wood
all-
and...
Is that all you had to say? You got
Well,
the
I just
job?
put it into one and went, I think of a home. So if you want to build a home,
God.
go to a juicing store.
They must have loved that, yeah.
They should be sponsoring me, actually.
It's funny.
Again.
It doesn't happen nowadays, that sort of scenario, really.
No, that's what I'm saying, how
teams
lucky I
want
was,
just
because
money.
I got a free drive in F3. Camel, they paid me like 20 grand as a personal sponsor. 20 grand in 1989. I lived the whole year and still had half left. You know what I mean? And then I got signed to do F1 and I was a professional driver all the way to 2012.
Yeah.
There are
So-
teams now that do free drives. I've seen it with, I think, High Tech. Who have
Browning
been
had that, didn't
Browning,
they?
yeah, but it's rare.
It's rare.
very,
Very
rare.
rare.
Much
You have
rarer
to be
than-
exceptionally good. And
Yep.
so typically now, I wanted to ask, because drivers get into it and typically have to build like a personal brand to gain
Yep.
sponsors. And some people go down the route of making a TikTok and doing TikTok dances or whatever. I don't know, but like
Wankers.
it's what.
Yeah, it's a
Said
different.
wankers.
It's obviously a different world
But
to when
I
I
do
was.
that.
It's like the thing is, it's like it's at the same time people, because for example, I'm like quite I've struggled with it in the past to do that, to raise sponsorship, because I learnt too late. It's not about just being fast. So you have to have this balance now where you can't just focus on being quick at all and go for a scholarship. You have to do this whole, be a businessman basically, and build your social media and use in
how
racing.
often does that get taught at school?
Never.
Never.
Doesn't, does it?
No.
Doesn't. So you have to learn as soon as you come out and you want
Yeah.
to be a driver. You have to learn all that stuff.
Mm.
And you will be a bit of an alien as well, by the way, if you do go down this route, because you don't learn it at school. Like I'm in that situation where all my friends went to uni and now they're looking at getting a job or they're traveling. And like as I talk to some of them, I'm like, my life is so it's completely different. And when you first start, especially if you're like, you know, anywhere between, I don't know, 18 and 30, wanting to start racing or anything, and you take that step outside of the normal, here's what you should do. You should go to school, you should go to uni, and you should get this job and work your way up the corporate ladder, whatever it is. Like it is difficult to be that alien. And at the like by alien, I mean you're different to all your friends. You won't have much in common with them. You might lose some people along the way, friends-wise. You might also be ridiculed by your mates. Like this podcast was ridiculed by my mates when we first started it, and now that doesn't happen anymore because we get good views. We've got amazing guests. Like
people
you.
love to judge,
amazing guests. Yeah,
but I was shit when we started this. I couldn't stop interrupting guests, etc. But you've just got to deal with the amount of ridicule I've had online as well from like different clips we put out that's got millions of views about whether it's my appearance or my, you know, interrupting. You just got to like be thick-skinned and deal with it.
Because like being in a race car.
Exactly.
Forget about the noise, you know, because at the end of the day, if you buy into that and draw yourself into it, you're going to change who you are and the direction that you think you're going. You know, it's going to be more difficult because you're consumed about what other people are thinking, you know. And it's a horrible situation, I think, in terms of what social media platforms aren't the problem. It's just there's a lot of people out there that want to make a lot of judgment against people, and you sit there and go, really?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, you know, we've all had it. I mean,
it's like sink or swim, isn't it? I mean, that either, which it did for me, was rolls me up and makes me work harder.
Yeah, well, you can turn it into, you know, a more positive energy, can't you?
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me, that motivates me. And I think with like the best sportsmen in the world as well, like your Lewis Hamiltons or whatever, Verstappens, they've always got this feeling that the world's against them. And that is why they're so good, because they're constantly like proving people wrong. It might be ego, it might just be because, you know, they want to be the best. But it's the people that get to F1 that are amazing talents and might not be any slower than Lewis or Max, but they're more mentally weak. As soon as someone says, you know, they get some bad press about something, or you know, I don't want to use Lando as an example, but like, or has Lando lost it? Is he losing his head? If that gets to your head, you know, that's when people crumble, and it's the same across everything. But anyway,
I was going to say I had an experience in '87 at the Australian Grand Prix support race. 3 months before that, my father and I stopped talking because I had to tell him my girlfriend was pregnant. And all of a sudden...
How old are you, sorry?
I was 22.
Shit, that's my age.
Which went down like a lead balloon. And Dad and I just didn't speak for three months.
Really?
And I went off, I was racing in America, and I came back to do this one race in the F2 at the Australian Grand Prix. And I qualified at the back because every time I went out, the car stopped. And my mum and dad are standing in front of me not long before the race, probably an hour or so before the race. And like, you know, it's my dad. I'm trying to bridge the gap. You know, how do we mend this? You know what I mean? And he was wearing a Formula One pass. I don't know where this came from, but I looked at it and I said, "Oh, you better get me one of those for when I'm in Formula One." And he just looked at me and he said, "The days of you ever getting to Formula One are finished."
Wow. And
he dead set meant it. You know what I mean? And I said, F you. And I all of a sudden I went from a mood of trying to, you know, reconnect to my dad to, right, okay, I'm going to bloody show you. And I just literally got in that car and I went to a completely different mindset where I turned what he said, instead of like walking towards the car saying my career's finished, it was like, no, screw you, I'm going to show you. And I went from 35th to 1st in 15 laps.
Wow.
And I drove at a level I never knew existed. And that's where I really learned a lot more about this. And my dad was always good. He said, "David, it's all about this."
Yeah.
But he could never articulate it and explain it, but he'd just point to it, and I had to go and experience it. And then I understood then, a lot more about what he was saying. But it took me to a place where you talk about being in the moment. I mean, the energy that I had inside me, instead of anger, it was determination, motivation. I was going out there to prove something, you know what I mean? And I ended up, winning the race in 15 laps.
That's crazy.
That's incredible.
But that's exactly what you were talking about in terms of you can either listen to that and get yourself down, or you use it as motivation. It's just an example of it.
Jenson Button had a similar experience. He taught about his dad. They were on the way back from a karting race when he was young, and he didn't get told from his dad straight away. He actually heard in the background. He said his father mentioned, "I'm not sure if he's got it."
I remember that.
That wasn't actually direct to his own son. That's actually not nice to hear, is it?
From your own dad.
From your own dad, yeah. And look what
Well,
he
I
did.
know what that feels like.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gus is right. You see the great drives and championship fights when the world's against them.
Yeah.
And you see the greats come out.
I mean, how many times can you look at it, like any sportsman, that all of a sudden a certain situation arises and all of a sudden their level of focus, their level of determination, the drive to get there is so much stronger, and all of a sudden it's like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the battle as a sportsman, to get yourself at that level on a consistent basis. It ain't easy, we all have our little dips in here and there, but that's the challenge, I think, to just stay focused and have that motivation, that drive to get to where you want to get to, and then stuff happens,
Absolutely.
Amazing. I think we wrap up.
We're going for a long time.
Yeah, we could
sorry.
go. No,
don't be sorry.
No, I've learned so much in this conversation, because I mean, I haven't really sat down with a Formula One driver much before, I think it's fascinating for people to hear what you go through, and how also you've really taught there's not like a conventional route to success. In life, you just go through different situations, be it from being on a farmyard in a tractor to then being in British Formula 3 a few years later with pure grit and determination, and also staying present. I think you've really touched on as well in all the conversations, because you've gone into incredible detail in every conversation. I think that's the thing, that's really brought you a lot of success. And I really thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for
been
coming
amazing.
Well,
thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. It was a great chat.
That's been very inspiring, very interesting, motivating, and I think especially the younger guys and girls and mums and dads taking their kids through racing take a lot from this episode, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.